homework video on the unit circle. So, can you find the value of cosine 300? What are the steps? So, step number one is to find the point on the unit circle. So, if you look at your unit circle, what's the point that goes with it? Now, so if you look at it, that's great, and you have it in front of you. I'm going to also teach you how would you memorize it if you had to. So, I'm going to also go with that. So, if you just want to look off the unit circle, so be it, and look for 300 degrees and tell me the point and write it down. I'm also going to teach you how you do it without having a unit circle in front of you. So I want to find the reference angle for 300. And the two numbers used for a reference angle is 360 or 180. So because it's closer to 360, I'm going to subtract 300 and 360. And I found the reference angle is to be 60 degrees. At 60 degrees, the point on the unit circle is 1/2 and root 3 over 2. We need to have that memorized, just the first quadrant. I also need to know what quadrant we're in. So for 300 degrees, what quadrant is that in? And that's quadrant number 4, which means x is positive and y is negative. So we have a positive x value, but we have a negative y value. So without having a unit circle in front of me, I can come up with the point that I need. The second thing I need to know is the definition. Well, cosine goes with the x coordinate only. So for this point, only write down the x coordinate and you have the answer. Let's try that again. 14, negative 210. So the first thing I would do is I would add 360 and find the positive angle that is coterminal to it. It's easier to work with. So what's 360 take away 210? And that's 150. The next thing I would do, if I didn't have a unit circle, so if you want to use it, go and look at it and write down the point. But I'm going to teach you how to do it without having a unit circle in front of you. I would take the reference angle of that. Now, reference angle is found by using either 360 or 180 and subtracting. So 180 take away 150. That's closer than 360. So that's why I'm using 180. And that leaves me with a reference angle of 30. So now I have to have memorized the first quadrant. What's the point that goes with 30? And that answer is root 3 over 2 and 1/2. What quadrant is 150 in? That's quadrant number 2. That's also important. That means the x value is negative and the y value is positive. So we have a negative x value and a positive y value. What's the definition of cosecant? Well, it's the reciprocal of sine. So that means it's the reciprocal of only the y value. So look at the y value. What's the reciprocal? And you have the answer. Number 15, 270. Can you find the point there for 270? Now, I know that 270 is on an axis. So if I drew this circle for you, 270 is at the bottom of the circle. So it doesn't have a reference angle because the angle is 90 when you subtract it with the horizontal. So it has to be less than 90 to have a reference angle. So it's just a point right there at the very bottom. And that point at the bottom of the circle is 0 and negative 1. Whatever it takes to get that correct point with the signs is where we need to go. What's the definition of cotangent? It's the reciprocal of tangent. So tangent was y over x. So that means cotangent is x over y. And now we have our answer. So x divided by y, that's 0 divided by negative 1. And that answer is 0. 0 on top, good. 0 on the bottom, bad. All right, 16. Negative 135. First step, add 360. Make it a positive coterminal angle. So we're going to add 360 to negative 135. And I'm going to get 225. So there's the positive angle that's coterminal to negative 135. Next, I need to know the reference angle there. So I'm going to take 225, I'm going to subtract 180. When I subtract 180, I get an answer of 45. So in quadrant number 1, what's the 45 degree angle? And the answer is root 2 over 2, or what the point is that goes with 45 degrees. It's root 2 over 2 and root 2 over 2. Next, what quadrant are we in for negative 135 or positive 225? So we're in quadrant number 3. Why does that matter? That means the x is negative and the y is negative. All done by memory. Next, sine, what's the definition? Well, sine goes with the y coordinate only. So can you tell me the y coordinate there? That's negative root 2 over 2, and you have the answer. 17, 90 degrees. What point goes with 90? Well, 90 is at the very top of the circle. And that point at the top is 0 and 1. What's the definition of tangent? Tangent is y divided by x. So when I look at this and go y divided by x, I get 1 divided by 0. So I know the answer in this case is undefined. 0 on top, good. 0 on the bottom, bad. 18. Negative 60. Add 360, and you get the answer positive 300. Take 360 again and subtract 300 to find the reference angle. So the reference angle is 60, and the quadrant that we're in is quadrant number 4. So at 60 degrees, what point is it on the unit circle? So it's 1/2 and root 3 over 2. In quadrant number 4, x is positive, and the y value is negative. What's the definition of secant? So secant is the reciprocal of cosine. So the definition is 1 over x, or the reciprocal of x. So only the x coordinate. What's the reciprocal of 1/2? And you have the answer. It's 2. 19. 3 pi over 4. How would I understand the point on the unit circle that goes with that? So I'm not going to convert it to degrees. When it's in radians, I look at the denominator. The denominator tells me the reference angle. So a denominator of 4 tells me the reference angle is 45. And I already know the point on the unit circle that goes with 45, which is root 2 over 2 and root 2 over 2. What quadrant are we in? This might be a little bit challenging, but let's remember that in quadrant number 1, it's 1 over 4. And you just do the odd numbers around. So 1 over 4, 3 over 4, 5 over 4, 7. This is where 3 over 4 is when you count around. It's in quadrant number 2. So in quadrant number 2, the x coordinate is negative and the y coordinate is positive. Now that you have the point, now you need to know the definition. So off a unit circle, what's the definition of cotangent? And again, that is the reciprocal of tangents, right? That's x over y. So when I look at that and take the x coordinate divided by the y coordinate, notice you're dividing the same number. So that answer is going to be negative 1 because one number is negative and one number is positive. 20. Negative 11 pi over 6. So first, I know the reference angle is going to be 30 degrees because of the denominator. That means it's either going to be root 3 over 2 and 1/2. Now, what I don't know yet, which I will, is what quadrant negative 11 pi over 6 is. So it might be helpful to write it as a positive angle to see it. So if I add 2 pi to that and make the denominators the same, I get 2 times 6. That's 12 take away 11. That's 1 pi over 6. So where is positive 1 pi over 6 in? That's in quadrant number 1. And in quadrant number 1, they are both positive. So that's a good point. Now, what's the definition for sine? That's the y coordinate. And what's the y coordinate there? And the answer is 1/2. 21. Secant pi over 6. So the first thing I noticed, the denominator is 6, so it's a 30-degree reference angle. That's root 3 over 2 and 1/2. Secant's the reciprocal of the x coordinate. Now notice that pi over 6 is in quadrant number 1. So the x and y coordinate are positive. So all we need to do is take the x coordinate and do the reciprocal. So that's 2 over root 3. And then when I multiply by root 3, you get 2 root 3 over 3. And you have the answer. Number 22, negative 2 pi over 3. I want to know what the value of that is for tangent. So first thing I notice is the denominator is 3. That means it's a 60-degree reference angle. The point on the unit circle for that is 1/2 and root 3 over 2. The next thing I need to know is what quadrant it's in. So if I take negative 2 pi over 3 and I add 2 pi to it to change it to a positive number, I need common denominators, so I'm going to multiply by 3. I end up with 6 take away 2, and 6 take away 2 gives me 4 pi over 3. Those are coterminal. Then I need to know what quadrant 4 pi over 3 is in. That's knowing your unit circle. So we can do a little set of axes and count until we get to 4 pi over 3. So in quadrant 1, it's 1 pi over 3, 2 pi over 3. Here it's 4 over 3 and 5 over 3. And that works in terms of like as you practice, you'll remember it better. This is in quadrant number 3. So that means both the x and the y are both negative. What's the definition of tangent? That's y divided by x. So if I look at the y coordinate and the x coordinate, I already know they both have a 2 in the denominator. So I don't need to worry about the denominator. They're going to divide out. So just look at the numerator. A negative divided by a negative, that's a positive answer. So it's just positive root 3 over 1 or positive root 3. And the reason the answer is positive is because a negative divided by a negative is positive. All right, 2 more here. The value of cosine at negative 3 pi over 4. So the denominator 4 gives me a 45-degree reference angle. So that means the point would be root 2 over 2 and root 2 over 2. What quadrant are we in for negative 3 pi over 4? So I'm going to find the reference angle by adding 2 pi. I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 4. So 8 take away 3 gives me 5 over 4. So on my unit circle, 5 pi over 4 is in quadrant number 3. That means the x and the y are both negative. Now, cosine just goes with the x coordinate. So the x coordinate there is negative root 2 over 2, and you have your answer. All right, last one together. Number 24, cosecant 5 pi over 3. So the 3 in the denominator tells me it's a 60-degree reference angle. That means the point at 60 is 1/2 and root 3 over 2. I need to know what quadrant 5 pi over 3 is in. It's in quadrant number 4. That means the x is positive and the y is negative. Then I need to know the definition of cosecant, which is the reciprocal of sine. So it's the reciprocal of the y coordinate. So look at the y coordinate only and do the reciprocal. Reciprocal means the sign stays the same, so it stays negative. I do the reciprocal, and then I multiply top and bottom by root 3, and you have your answer. So there's your homework on the unit circle. I'm going to remind you, the unit circle has a radius of 1. The unit circle is used to generate trig values when you don't have a calculator. This takes work. This is high level stuff. This is not something that just gets learned in 20 minutes. It's practicing and practicing and doing it together and so on. So I'm proud of you that you got to the end of the homework. Keep up your great work. All right, Mr. G Math, over and out.